There being a quorum present, I am opening the January 31st, 2022 meeting of the Ad Hoc Bylaw Committee. I will note that this is being recorded, streamed to the internet, will be rebroadcast on local Rutland cable television, and will be put on the YouTube channel.
All right, and I am going to open the Board of Selectmen's meeting. It is 6:04. If I can get a waiver of the Zoom reading.
So moved.
Whitman seconds.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Whitman, aye.
Nichols, aye. All right.
Okay, so before we go deeply into specific reviews, we have some specific progress to discuss. There are bylaw changes coming this annual town meeting because, at the very least, there will be changes to the revolving funds bylaw. And I think it's very bad that we have not had a town administrator bylaw. And so I think we ought to put those through. But that implies, alas, a lot more. Let me just share that. Come on. Share that screen. Now people can see it. We need to pass as a body chapters 1 through 5. Otherwise, we create a lot of inconsistencies in the bylaws and conflicts. And since there's no such thing as too much of a good thing, we are proposing that we put chapters 1 through 6 up in, come on, thank you, at this upcoming annual town meeting. So, for those of you who, it's the general government, general provisions, financial affairs, which has a little complexity to it certainly, legal affairs, boards, committees, commissions, and councils, or otherwise called multi-member bodies, and then public and private ways. Chapter 6 is not as required as the others to be in the body, but there's been a lot of discussion about scenic roads lately, and some other things that we're putting in some of these other bylaws that we'll get to as we review them, that we would like, the committee would like very much to put them on annual town meeting. Now, annual town meeting is a long affair. It's recently had 20-ish, 25-ish articles, generally, virtually every time. So we are not suggesting that we take until 2 a.m. We are suggesting that we do the usual town meeting warrant articles, which are certain to include all of our financials, all the budgets, I should say, and all the usual things we need to pass. There will almost certainly be at least one street acceptance up. That's what I'm hearing anyway. I think there'll be a lot of little things. So it is our suggestion that at the end of that business, we adjourn town meeting for 1 week, and the following Saturday, it's a bylaw meeting. It's still annual town meeting. It's just adjourned. It's just not a final adjournment, so we're allowed to continue business. So we want to know what the select board thinks about that.
I have a question.
Yes?
The current, if I may, through the chair.
Sure.
The current annual town meeting for this year, I know we had the calendar our last select board meeting, I don't have it with me, I don't think, but is it currently planned to be the usual night before Mother's Day?
Yes.
And then...
That's our bylaw. That's what our bylaw says.
Right, I know we had
Yeah.
talked about changing the bylaw, but I didn't think that, I mean, obviously we haven't accepted that yet, but so this annual would be the usual.
It will be May 7th.
So then the continuation would be,
The 14th.
yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Does anybody have any opinions regarding?
I don't have any objections myself, but
What is the cost to prolong it?
The cost is the school, because it's a weekend, so we pay them for setup, cleanup. I honestly don't know what their charges are.
Yeah, I don't see those bills. Beth could let us know what the last time around was. And the other costs are just our check-in people. So a couple-
Would they actually have to break it down and clean it and do, or would it just stay?
It's in May, school's still in session. They would have to
Oh,
tear it
that's
down and
right,
put
so
it
yeah,
back
they'd
up
have to
again.
do the whole thing.
I mean, I know we had talked about when we were talking about all the bylaw changes and everything, we're probably looking at doing a separate, a bylaw only
Mhm.
piece to the town meeting, just because it's so much work and time and effort, rather than try to rush anything through the normal annual where we do the financial business and everything, and still providing an opportunity for the feedback and time that reflects the time and work that the ad hoc committee has put in. So I don't think it's not news to me that that's kind of what you're proposing, what we're looking at. I mean,
An adjourned town meeting manages, I think, to meet that spot where we don't have to take up a large chunk of annual time. It's still part of the annual town meeting, so that it gets past all the objections to bylaws should never be done at a special town meeting, which I happen to think is nonsense, but my opinion doesn't really matter. We can still make it part of annual and just not take up the time on that same night that we're doing, for example, the school budgets.
Was it mentioned at all to the moderator?
It has not yet been. We wanted to get your opinions on it before we brought it up. We'll send out an email tomorrow if you agree.
Anybody have any objections or any other questions?
my only other question.
Excuse me, Anita, Ron is joining right now.
Oh, okay, thank you.
I'm sorry. Please continue.
My only other question is the ad hoc bylaw committee feels comfortable, confident that chapters 1 through 6 will be completed and ready to be presented. That's with.
Well, that's the next issue, which is the speed which this review has gone. Last time, we got through 3 bylaws, and that's not the pace we need to meet. So, one of the things we need to do is to be sure that everybody comes to now. So, I didn't give everybody a lot of time. I did the publication of the bylaw book on Saturday, and I sent that out through email so everybody could get it. That link is going to be the link of the latest bylaws every time. It is important that this body come having reviewed them and with questions ready so we can address them rather than going line by line and why do we do. We're going to answer questions, why do we do this, what changed? I will continue to highlight the truly consequential changes to the bylaw. But we collectively need to pick up our pace. We have, looking at this list, of all those, there's only one that really isn't ready to go, that's treasurer collector, and one that's good enough to go, but we haven't heard the final word from FinCom.
And our committee did collectively vote to move forward, so everybody felt confident. The only thing that which I was going to bring this up at our meeting tomorrow, is I think I might need to do a little bit of research about exactly how you do adjourn town meetings, and can you specify, could somebody, if we were done with our regular business at 9, could somebody make a motion to start in on the adjourned part? And I don't know how that works, but
I think those are very good ideas. I think that whether it's an adjourned or part of the, I think that decision from a process point of view needs to be done when we really have a warrant. And I don't know what what other goodies are going to be on town meeting. There are bound to be some. I'm hearing about more zoning bylaw changes. I'm hearing things, as I've said, that suggest that there'll be more warrant articles than our 15 basic ones that we have to do every year. So when we know the size of the warrant, we can make a a final call. You can make a final call as to whether bylaws are part of that. It is in an adjourned part or not. And then, as Anita says, if we choose on the floor, perhaps we can pull them in if it seems like there's time.
So on that, that next day, we'll still need to meet a quorum, right? And
Yes.
do we feel we'll get a quorum of people to come to a bylaw meeting?
Our quorum's only 10.
Yeah.
Oh, it's
quorum's
still
10
only
right
10?
now.
I thought there was some talk that,
Oh,
Well,
that's
in
part of
here.
our changes.
oh, I
that
thought it
haven't
was
been
because of the
put through yet.
census. It's by the bylaw you changed it?
By our
Yes.
bylaw,
Oh, okay.
in our bylaw. We proposed just raising it to 30, only because I've heard horror stories about other towns that are at 100 or more
Right.
that have to make phone calls and spend 45 minutes,
Okay.
waiting for people.
Yeah.
So, but even if this was voted on the floor, it would take 90 days before the AG, so we wouldn't be seeing a quorum of 30 until the fall.
Okay. I thought it was census driven, that's what,
Yeah,
that's
no.
fine.
Not for Rutland.
Anybody have any other comments? All right. So I mean, I think the board's on board.
All right.
It's needed.
So we'll consider that our, what I'm going to call a term from work, our plan of record, and we'll advance towards that. So towards that end, you may remember that part of the process is public information sessions held by the Bylaw Committee. Our first one is now scheduled for February 9th. That's on the calendar now, isn't it, Anita? Yes, that's what I thought. We're working up a big announcement to put in an email blast, the whole thing, so that there'll be more than just the calendar entry. That hopefully will drive attendance. We'll see. But even if nobody shows up and nobody joins through Zoom, we'll still hold the same session. It's just we won't get questions from the public, but we'll review them because it's going to be recorded, it's going to be rebroadcast. I do have a question which sure sounds unrelated. There has been a little bit of discussion over the past 18 months or so about Community Preservation Act. It's sort of reared its head again in several discussions that I've had recently. And the reason I bring it up here is it requires a bylaw, which I'm happy to say the Bylaw Committee has already written and reviewed itself. We just haven't had any peer review on it. So I can add that to the list with less than an hour's work. But that's all subject to the Select Board willing to support the Community Preservation Act. With things that haven't been discussed, and yes, there's even more public information and public education that needs to be done to make that a successful effort. And quite frankly, I can't lead that effort. I don't have the time. But I'm sure we can find someone who will be happy to collect the information from the assessors, have a formal meeting with the Select Board, hold an educational session or two with the public before town meeting so we can vote on it.
So that includes like some kind of like a tax, right, to fund it?
Yes,
So
it's
it's an increased tax.
it's an increase to the real estate taxes.
Usually a percentage basis.
Yeah, when we considered this before, we were considering 1/2 of 1%. And I don't remember what the numbers are for that it would raise, but it turns out to be something that could easily have funded the repairs on the wood studio and set some money aside for purchasing land that's coming out of 61A, but not enough to buy any in 1 year. I'm not trying to make it sound like it's going to solve huge problems. But it's something, it's a good start, and if we could do it and stick with it, then there's money for all of the CPA, not requirements, the abilities, I guess I would say.
If I
Upgrading
may,
it.
oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, upgrading and improving playgrounds is another use for it.
If I may, I think the state, I don't know currently what the current state match is. I know when CPA was first created, the state would match a significant portion of what the cities and towns voted to appropriate. I think that has since decreased some, but there is still a state matching piece. The pro in my eyes is that it would be assessed to every landowner, property owner in town, but it's money that's kind of earmarked for a lot of what we hear people wanting tax money to go towards, as far as preserving open space land, upgrading the town building, or preserving the town buildings, the playgrounds, walking trails, recreation types, the open space recreation type stuff. So it's kind of money that is in addition to what property taxes are covering, but it's earmarked for very specific uses, and it's not money that we as a select board or as a body could say, you know, okay, we are going to make a commitment that so much of property taxes is going to this, but then once financials play out, there's not that money that can go towards that. This is actually set up in such a manner that that money has to be used for what, I forget all of the boxes, but it's a lot of what we hear, or I hear a lot of people wanting more of in town.
So I'm sorry, I don't want to open up a huge discussion about CPA.
Yeah.
I just wanted to reintroduce the select board to it for consideration to think about for this year.
Just to clarify though, since it's an increase in taxes, it doesn't have to go to ballot? It goes, it's a
It
ballot.
does, it
does.
also needs to go to ballot.
All right.
It's both pass at town meeting and at the ballot.
Okay.
If I could I want to clarify one point, just,
Mhm.
it's not for all town buildings, only historical ones, so just to be clear, you can't use it for any building. It's specifically historical stuff.
And we don't have anything historic, do we?
Well, the Woods building is one.
The trouble is, we really don't have a
Doesn't-
list of historic buildings in this
No,
town.
the Woods building is not classified as historic.
No, it's
Well, it's
not classified
It
historic.
has to be classified as
It's
historic.
not state-
So
it's
then
not
it
on the
can't be
state
used
list,
for any
so-
buildings. All right, I think this
Yeah,
is
maybe
gonna be a long discussion.
Yeah, we have to
So-
look.
I think it will be,
Yeah.
so I just wanted to introduce that so that we can figure out if we want to put
Right.
the bylaw on the list this year as well. So I said 9th February is our first. We're planning, we haven't set the date for the March or the April meeting. As soon as we get through chapters 1 and 2, as soon as we get through chapters 1 and 2, they're going straight to legal review. And as soon as we get more done, we'll send them all off also, so we can keep the process flowing. In fact, I should send Lauren an email saying, we're gonna start sending you buckets of bylaws. All right. Questions on all of that? Then, let's actually move down. Let's start by covering and reviewing the changes since last time. General provisions, I think the only change on this one was the definition of committee to add not only permanent or ad hoc. Wait a minute, did we not? This doesn't have appointed or elected in it. Now I'm gonna have to see what happened, because I know we added it.
Mhm.
I hate computers. So the definition of committee, we're actually gonna tweak that a little bit more, but permanent or ad hoc, elected or appointed, which was your question. I don't remember any other changes from this bylaw that we discussed. That's all the same. Moving on to appointed committees. Now I have to remember all the changes we put in based on this. So there are a lot of little changes to appointment committee in terms. Again, this is all appointed committees, so they're all appointed by the select board. They serve without pay, shall serve. This is one of the big ones, is that we say specifically, each member shall serve until the member vacates the seat, the term expires, or a successor is appointed. So any of those things make the current holder of the seat no longer the holder of the seat. Shall under elect its officers, select a clerk, et cetera, et cetera. So not all committees have staggered terms. Most do, but some do not. I'm trying to remember which, like the 4th of July committee is yearly appointments. But Conservation Commission, most of the boards are 3-year staggered appointments. So those that are staggered, they're arranged so that that the same number of seats expire each year. Expiring terms are at the end of the fiscal years, which is to say June 30th. When this body fills a seat, that new member's seat expires when the original member seat would have expired. And this is the other one you asked us to add. When any member is absent from 5 consecutive committee meetings, except in case of illness or other good cause, and upon majority vote of such committee, the member's position shall be deemed vacant. I should probably say seat. Many of those are exactly the way that you saw them, but I know that we've changed words throughout. Questions on that? Okay. Everybody, all the members need to be registered voters of Rutland. C, except for certain town employees who may be appointed. So you've got to be a registered voter, and if you change voting jurisdiction, then you've automatically vacated your seat. I think we went through all of this last time. I don't remember. Anita, do you remember if there are any changes here on removal?
That's what I was looking back through the minutes.
I do think there were some changes, some clarification. Hearing shall occur before any removal action is taken. Written notice. Yes. Such notice may include a notice of immediate suspension, which is 5B2A. That was one of the things you wanted, which is a very good idea, the ability to immediately suspend. And then they can answer charges, and unless requested in writing, it's executive session. Afterwards, you have 3 days after the hearing to get written notification of the decision. And as Dee says, it says appointing authority, and in most cases that means the select board's authority is final on this.
One comment for,
Yes.
under C, where it says authority within 3 days after the hearing, up above we say 5 days prior to such hearing, exclusive of Sundays and holidays. Is that 3 days also exclusive of Sundays and holidays?
That should also
or-
probably say exclusive of Sundays and holidays.
I just want to be
Because
consistent in
Sundays,
what we're working with.
well, not only that, I don't think you're allowed to work by state law, be forced to work on Sundays or holidays, so I think we just missed that, you're right. Questions on this? Moving ahead to town meetings. So, the biggest point of discussion of the last meeting that I remember is when to hold annual town meeting. And the discussion was, should it be much later? Nobody suggested it be earlier. Good. At the end, the committee didn't say, we're unwilling to move town meeting from our suggested the Saturday following the second Monday of May, as opposed to the current preceding the second Monday in May. So the reason we think it's best to stay with this, today the sequence of town meetings is Paxton, Rutland, Princeton, Holden, and Sterling's a wild card because their bylaw says town meeting shall take place anytime from April 1st to May 31st. So I can't tell you when their town meeting is going to be. By changing it to this, Princeton and Rutland change places. So we become third of 4. If we move it far enough away to be, if we were to move it, so Holden holds it the their wording in their bylaw aside the third Monday in May. That's when they hold their first night of town meeting.
Exactly a week after the election.
That's right.
And Princeton holds it the next night. I don't know why.
The night
somebody did
after
that
their
to
election.
town clerk. That's terrible. I don't even know how you do it.
So it keeps Rutland center-ish. If we move it much later, we will be after all the other towns do their budget and their school committee. And there is therefore the possibility that Rutland's vote is unimportant because by agreement with the regional school district, the budget's set. Also, if election is more than 35 days before the town meeting, it's a change in our process, which isn't a big deal. It is, you have to actually create separate warrants, one for the election and one for the town meeting, where today they're held in a single warrant. So that is mostly a process and a paperwork question more than anything else, but that's the side effect of moving it, yes.
If I may, I have a question, and this is probably for maybe Anita, you might know. I know in the past, it had been after the election, it's, kind of flip-flopped back and forth a little bit.
Mhm.
And I was thinking about this, now that kind of the argument had been, we have a town administrator who kind of takes the reins on a lot of this stuff, so it's not as important to have a select board that's been on the whole way through. But my question is, what other positions are there that have significant function in town meeting? And I think of the moderator appointing FinCom and everything, and it's possible then that, we haven't had a contested moderator race
Quite a few years.
in a number of years, but it could at some point down the road turn into that we would have a new moderator that's been elected in 5 days before, that then is appointing FinCom and everything. I know it's been done in the past, I assume. I don't know.
Oh, it had been done that way for quite a long time,
Yeah,
yes.
I mean, until like 7 years ago, I think, we always had the meeting
Yeah.
following the election, so.
I just wanted, it's just
With that-
something as we were thinking through the process as to what, how it would play out.
I know the argument at the time to switch it, and it was pre-town administrator, was that the select board, and they were the ones that would have to, present and argue the warrant on the floor. And, but now with the town administrator, I don't think that argument holds as much. The other thing is that no matter what, whoever comes in, they're stuck with that budget for the year, so that, it's one or the other.
Yeah.
The good thing about this one, not every year, but most years, it'll take it away from Mother's Day, which we've heard on the floor forever. And we tried, a couple of years ago, because for years people kept asking why we had it on a Saturday. And so we proposed that maybe 4 years ago, and it went down in flames, so.
It was not well accepted,
No,
yes.
and people have been asking for it, so. But
So it is our opinion, moving it to the Saturday after the election is the best compromise, but as far as I'm concerned, at the end of the day, select board really needs to weigh in on what you would prefer. If you'd prefer it to be later, again, I remember the discussion, sometimes we have troubles getting all the financial numbers that we need in time for town meeting. It's happened more than once. But I don't know what date we could move it to that would guarantee it. And the other thing about having it in May is that if we have to do more work at another town meeting, hello, Wachusett budget as a particular example. If we have to do something with that, it gives us time to make a town meeting before June 30th. So that's again, having seen that happen also in my time here in Rutland, it's almost, and I hate to say it this way, but it's true, it's competing fears. It's the fear of not having all the information you need. It's the fear of the town not accepting the recommendation that we collectively, town government, hope they will accept or reject. It's,
And you said if it was much later, we'd probably have 2 warrants, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so I
If
think
it's
that'd be,
35 days, more than 35.
that'd be confusing to people, I mean, in my opinion.
Nobody likes change.
Yeah. Well, it's hard enough for them to follow.
One.
I don't mean they can't follow it, but all that changing, I think, would be confusing to them, most people. So I'd have concern breaking the warrant.
If I may, I have another question. Did FinCom weigh in at all? I just am, again, and I think I had voiced this not as a concern, but just as a question when we met last time, as far as if we're looking at any sort of debt exclusion or override or anything, oftentimes seeing it, and I've only been in town since we've been doing it the way we've currently been doing it, is we have all that presentation at the annual town meeting, so people have that information and kind of know in advance, like, okay, this is what this and what my vote on Monday means. And whereas if we have the election first, and I'm not looking at an override, but let's say a debt exclusion or something, I don't know what the likelihood of something like that passing would be if there's not conversation and the education opportunity that's held at town meeting. I don't know. That was, I think, something I had asked before, and I don't know if FinCom had weighed in at all.
FinCom had not weighed in any of my discussions with them about it.
I would say this, I think you're 100% correct. I think you want to have that discussion prior to the election. So I think it's a mistake not to, because it's hard enough to educate people on debt exclusions, without that. And I mean, so I think that is a big benefit. So I would agree postponing it would cause more of an issue in that respect.
I mean, I can make the opposite argument that we're looking at overrides. I mean, I think historically we can say overrides aren't successful, but if we are looking at it then we can say we know going into the town meeting what money we have to work with versus contingent on an override or contingent on this or contingent on that. My concern is a little bit more of the education piece that can be had at the annual town meeting where people are going in and seeing the financials and able to make some of those decisions. I don't know.
I have seen it more often than I care to think about. It doesn't matter how many hearings or information sessions you have. I'm going to just call out last town meeting with the accessory dwelling unit, and questions came up, good questions, from people who did not attend the hearing of the public information session. So I don't know how to fix that problem. I'll tell you the honest truth. And I would also say, I think maybe I shouldn't just, I'll make a statement. I think that moving annual town meeting earlier is a greater mistake than moving it.
I'm not arguing at all.
Yeah.
My argument would be whether to keep it as it is, which has its host of problems logistically, just the Saturday that happens to fall on and everything, or moving it later, which then may have different logistical issues based on the function of town. I don't know. I don't have the history. Since I've been here, it's always been this way.
Anita, do you know of other towns that have the election before their meetings, whether it becomes an issue for them to pass? Has that been a hurdle
Not
for
really,
them?
because for every argument
Right.
that you can make one way, you can make one another.
I guess you have to be proactive and really try to get information. If you really
Right.
feel strongly about supporting an override or a debt exclusion or something, we'd have to be as proactive as possible to get that information out. But I do think it will have an effect on it. But
Mr. Chairman, I will say this, there's a lot of towns who set their budgets without having the actual numbers in from the state because they start so early in the process. So that's not unique, and then they kind of let it fall to free cash if there's extra money in the state or whatever. So they use the best estimates at the time, but that's not unusual at all. A lot of towns finish their budget process without the state actual numbers.
And so it really is, it's not running from fear, it's deciding which compromises you choose to make when setting the date. What do you know? What do you not know? What more are you going to learn? How much less can you inform the public? Those are the trade-offs.
Well, I mean, it's been discussed on several occasions, so it's really gonna be up to the majority whether they want to support this bylaw change or not. So it's gonna be decided on the floor either way, right? You're gonna have
That is certainly true.
a group that's gonna be against it and a group that's gonna be for it, and this decision will be made on the floor, I guess. Like I said, it's been discussed on numerous occasions that I recall, so.
Okay, I don't think anything changed in the town meeting location. Or notice, quorum again 30, using town meeting time. I think all of this is just the way that it was the last time. Other questions or comments on town meetings? Moving on. The select board. Oh, is this different from the current powers of the select board bylaw? So, one of the first decisions that the committee made was that a bylaw for a board should be as inclusive, all-inclusive and exhaustive as it should be. If you look in the current bylaws, you'll find duties of the select board sprinkled throughout. There's some in FinCom, there's some in CIPC, there's some in, I forget all the places we took them from. But we collected all of those duties into this one bylaw. So this bylaw now represents with I have to leave myself a little wiggle room. So I'm not gonna say it's 100% exhaustive because the select board reach is so far and wide, and sometimes there are things you have to put somewhere else just because it doesn't make sense to put it somewhere else. But we've got, if somebody wants to know what a select board does, this is it. So, purpose, authority. We explicitly lay out that there are 5 members to staggered 3-year terms. Responsibilities, here we go. Select board functions as the chief executive officer of the town with responsibility for the general direction and management of the property and affairs of the town in all matters not otherwise provided for by law. So, now, the next bylaw to look at is the town administrative bylaw. This body is the chief executive, the town administrator is the chief administrative officer, and as part of that, many other officers. We'll talk about that when we get to that one.
Can I ask a question here, Mr. Chairman? So item number 2 concerns me because I'm not sure what it means, right? So no settlement should be made with payment of $1,000. So insurance companies constantly make settlements with insurance company money. That does not include that? Or is this only when the town appropriates a settlement amount?
Yes.
And that settlement amount's pretty small, so that means that if there was a lawsuit of any type that was going through any lawsuit for any settlement whatsoever would have to go to town meeting?
Yes.
Okay, but doesn't include any insurance settlements?
No, insurance is not covered by this. This is something that must be appropriated by the select board to settle an action. Now, I don't know why $1,000 is red. I'll fix that, but in the current bylaw, it's $300. And then our discussion last time, sometime in the past, was that $1,000 was a better number, and beyond that, we'd probably have insurance involved. Now, I'm not going to pretend to understand the limits of insurance and their payouts and what the town would have to appropriate separately. But again, this is the same structure that's in the current bylaw. So generically on B, it's you are the body who institute, prosecute, defend any and all claims. So if the town's a party, you're involved. You collectively are involved. C, select board shall have exclusive power to negotiate and enter into contracts unless this power has been conferred by bylaw or the general laws. So basically, you're the people who can sign contracts. Would you, I don't want to say frequently, have been known to pass off to the town administrator for certain ones, but I believe each one you need to do.
They approve them, all they do is pass them off to me for signature, because I bring all contracts before them, so they approve the contract, they just have me sign it,
Yeah.
that's all.
Here come some things that came from other, by the way, much of this, B and C came from the current legal affairs bylaw. That's structurally where it came from, yes.
Could you give me an example of something in B, 4B1? So what, give me an example of what we shouldn't be restricting. What is the treasurer collector going to do?
Tax title,
Okay,
that's really the it.
okay.
Sale of town property from foreclosures and stuff, so.
Right. Tax title of, yeah. And all that auctioning. Because MGL gives her specific powers in that realm.
Thank you.
So starting at D, we pulled these out of other bylaws. Select board shall place no article on any town meeting warrant accepting citizen petitions appropriating monies for a capital improvement until the capital improvement planning committee has considered such improvement. That is a little reworded, but straight out of the current CIPC bylaw. And we felt it was good to put it here, not just because it's a select board duty, but this is one of those things that's been passed over in several years, for several years. Sometimes it's remembered, sometimes it's not. Select board shall refer all articles in every town meeting warrant to the finance committee. Select board shall refer all proposed general bylaw change to the bylaw committee. Select board shall act as the town's board of public works. This is a new one, obviously. Said board shall have all powers and duties defined in general laws, chapter 41, section 69D. So this codifies the town meeting vote from 1975, I think, or 78, which is the town accepted chapter 41, section 69A through E, which created the Board of Public Works, which got rid of the sewer commissioners and water commissioners and highway department, and coalesced them all into a single Board of Public Works. And at the same town meeting, town voted to have the select board act as the Board of Public Works. This just puts it on paper. Questions on any of these duties?
I have, if I may, question going back to the point that Carol had asked about the treasurer collector. I know, and this is just very recent, the past kind of tax title stuff, there were a number of groups of citizens that had interest in different things or had hoped that the town could, obviously not in their current financial state, have an interest in certain properties for better use or economic development or whatever. I'm not familiar with the MGL. I haven't looked at the MGL for what bestows the treasurer collector. Is there any opportunity that we can still encourage those conversations without restricting the capacity?
So the fast answer is that the treasurer collector is not involved in, for example, 61A change of.
Right.
The treasurer collector in general is not involved in the acquisition of town property other than by tax title.
Right, and so my point is some of the properties that were taken from tax title, there were different groups that had hoped that at some point possibly the town would be in a better position to have a more proactive, and I just, I wanna know if we have this in here, I mean, it's set by MGL, but are we totally taking that off the table even down the road, as having that as an opportunity to encourage conversations, or encourage, hey, can we not rush this to tax title foreclosure sales and hang on to it so we can have a conversation about whether it's, a group of parcels, a particular parcel, I don't know.
I would maintain there are 2 or 3 different questions wrapped up in that, none of which I think a bylaw like this is going to address.
Okay.
So, the general laws don't say that tax title must be, that an action must be taken on tax title in a certain time frame. At least as far as I know, they don't. And based on our action, I believe that,
Right.
that how long we've waited sometimes, I expect that to be
Yep.
generally true. If the purpose of your question is, could someone else acquire the property, or could we turn tax title over? Well, let me answer that. Could we turn tax title over to someone else? The answer is no. Could we have someone else act on our behalf, which is the same thing? The answer is no. And could the town hold the property for an indefinite period of time? Yes. And so the time between taking by tax title, well, the time between missing the tax payment and taking by tax title is not fixed. The time between taking by tax title and presenting for auction is not fixed. And if the town doesn't hold it, the town has no choice but to put it out for auction. I mean, that's the process. So I don't know what we could change.
Okay, I just,
Yeah.
like, if there was, I don't have a specific, just
Mhm.
kind of thinking back to this last round, and say that there was a large piece that was, I don't know, let's say, really key for economic development. We now have an economic development commission that has a vision, that has opportunity. Miraculously, there's some amount of funding or something available, or that they could work towards developing that property. Could the town say, we're holding on to this as economic, to kind of promote ourselves as economic development or conservation or
So
agriculture?
the fast answer is the town can choose to not sell, to sell or not sell any piece of property that it owns.
Okay.
So
I just,
I'm just gonna pick Sunnyside Estates because it's one that comes to mind. I know there was some amount of interest in it. Depending upon how the deed was written, and I don't remember the details of it, but if it had been deeded up as separate parcels, then we could sell off onesie twosie parcels at auction and keep the rest in the town for its own use. Whether or not we would have to go through would also want to do a conservation restriction or historical restriction or whatever. Yes, Ron?
So I'm not an expert on this here, but here's what I would think, right, to answer your question. In order to foreclose and go through the foreclosure process and continue to get title, you have to go through the treasurer's foreclosure powers.
Yep.
The treasurer has an absolute right to sell the property at auction because the purpose is to reclaim the debt on the property, the tax debt.
right.
I also think that the treasurer could decide not to follow the auction process and hold on to the land and make a decision that the town could then sell the land in a different manner. But if we sell the land in a different manner, it then has to go through the normal procurement process. It has to be put out a request for proposals or whatever. It has to go through that full. You just can't go, okay, I want to sell it to this person. We still have to go through the land procurement or sales process as part of the Chapter 30B. So
Right.
in terms of that specific issue, we couldn't have just sold it to one of those people just ad hoc if we wanted to. We would have had to put it out to everybody in the public, let them bid. But that could have been done if the treasurer made the decision not to put it up for auction. But it's her decision. If she wants to put it up for auction, she can do that. We can't stop her. But if she decides, working like with me, she could say, okay, we're not going to put it for auction, and then I would have to do the sale in the normal procurement process. That make sense?
Yeah, and I mean, maybe I can just have, to better understand the MGL part, because I thought in the past, the treasurer collector had come before the select board and said, these are the parcels that I would like to package for auction and everything, and there was a conversation about that among the board, and we, as a board, agreed. But technically, we don't have to, based on the powers that treasurer collector is granted, and this is just kind of reinforcing the fact that that's more of a courtesy and less of a must-do
Requirement.
process.
Correct, the
Yeah.
treasurer has the absolute ability to sell the property without
Okay.
select board or any of us, but that doesn't mean she has to. She could refer with us and do whatever, but she doesn't have to.
And that's put out by, that power is by MGL,
Right.
correct? Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry for that.
Any other questions on duties? Now let's talk about power. Okay. The committee has been through a lot of MGL because we were trying to determine which positions the select board must appoint by MGL versus the ones the town administrator is allowed to appoint. And based on the recent history of having a town administrator, appointment powers have generally been deferred to the town administrator. The committee thought it was worthwhile to have a very clear understanding of exactly whom the select board must appoint and who the town administrator may appoint. So generally, these are the positions the select board is appointed either by if we look at 9, the appointing authority for members of non-elected committees. There you go. That's how you get to put all the volunteers in place on all the boards, committees, etc. That is by the town of Rutland. That's just the way we've done it. It's our history. Everything above that is based on MGL. So you appoint the town administrator, town council, town accountant, fire chief, treasurer collector, veterans agent, tree warden, and constables. Those are your duties to appoint by MGL. And just so we wouldn't lose track, I made sure we gave a reference to every one of those darn sections.
Okay, I'm sorry, I gotta ask a question here because it's a little bit confusing to me. I just wanna make sure there's clarity. So item number 10.
We'll get there. I'm not at 10.
Alright, when you
I just
get
want to
there.
hit 1 through 9.
Yep, go ahead.
If I may, I have a question. In the past,
Oh, I'm sorry, I wanna go to 9.
I wasn't on when the police chief was appointed, but I thought the board was involved in that, and I'm pretty sure the board was involved in DPW. I understand that that's not MGL, but is that a conversation that the board wants to have as far as board's involvement in appointing?
I agree. We should be involved in highway superintendent and police chief. We always have been.
Hold on. Highway superintendent is on the Board of Public Works, not on the select board. So, no, for that one. Police, so you are because you're the Board of Public Works, but in terms of the select board powers and the office of the select board, separable from Board of Public Works. Select board has nothing to do with the DPW.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Now-
I see where you're going.
So, here's where, there is a period, there's a frequency with which you have to appoint a police chief. I'm not saying you guys should never be involved, because in fact I would maintain you folks should be involved when hiring a new police chief. But for the appointment every however frequent that is, that part's been deferred to the town administrator, has been since Margaret's days.
So what I'm used to, again, every town can do what it wants, but in many of these positions, let's say a police chief, usually it's the town administrator who will appoint, but it has to be confirmed by the board of selectmen. That's the difference. So the selectmen play a role in that they can confirm or not confirm any appointment like that. But that, I don't know if that's in the bylaws we have, but it's in a lot of bylaws, a lot of
It's
things.
not in any bylaw, it's not in any Rutland bylaw, I'll say that.
So that's how there's always involvement, no matter what I mean, it's usually for department heads. All the department heads have where the town administrator appoints, but they have to be confirmed by the board of selectmen. That's how a lot of towns do it. I want a question on 9 though. I kind of passed through it.
I personally think we should be involved in the police chief to interview and whatever. See, this is where I disagree with you on that one.
Hey, listen, this is why we have the discussion. I am not saying you're wrong. I expressed what we were thinking of in the committee as we were going through this.
No, that's
So-
fine.
So if we want one that says, shall ratify actually, you can go in lots of ways. The way it is right now is it's done by the TA. It's easy enough to have a ratification clause there or here. Or it could be completely under the authority of the select board, in which case every time, every new contract, every new whatever, the contracts you have to do anyway, but which way would you like it to go?
I do think all department heads should be ratified by the board, all department heads. And maybe the police chief, we can talk differently.
Because I've been here for all the police chiefs.
And that was for the interview and hiring process, right?
Interviewing and hiring process. Yeah. And I don't know, I think we should be, but that's me, myself. That's not,
I'm not saying you shouldn't, and we just heard a very broader, I don't have a problem with that either. If it makes sense that as the executive you would want to know and therefore interview anyone who's going to be appointed to any department head position. I can understand that. Any appointed department head, yes.
Well, obviously, yeah.
I'm looking at Anita over there saying, I'm not sure there's a lot of ratification that can take place there, but yes. That's easy, we can add that.
Yeah, do you want something, do you think that we should be involved further than that, Skip, on any of the other positions, or are you fine with ratifying all department heads? Because then it involves the board to basically bless the appointment before anybody can be appointed, so.
yeah, well, I suppose, I don't know. I think we should be involved in the complete hiring of the person.
Right.
Not
So
just
were you
ratifying,
involved when
but
Margaret was here? Were
Police,
you on the board?
fire, dispatch, the major ones that, that are there on our front lines more so than
Well, especially,
highways.
the fire chief reports to the board. He's the only one that directly reports,
Yeah.
right? So we would be involved in the hiring of that position, I assume.
Yeah, but that's on there.
Right,
Because that's the strong chief.
right, because it's strong chief.
There
And
isn't,
actually, we have a strong police chief too. That just got voted in not too long ago.
Yeah, but it's not the same strength.
Oh, I know it ain't.
yeah,
I
it
know
doesn't
it
give the same powers. Well, I think is Chief Nick is probably the only police chief that's been appointed since we've had a town administrator. Am I right on that one? I mean, because half was,
Yes, I believe that's
Yeah,
half was
Hapakowski
way, half
was,
was way before, so.
And I think that was, I'm just thinking about how I've been on for the town administrator iterations and the DPW, and we had worked with search firms or not, and, kind of narrowed it down to either there was a subcommittee or a search firm or something that narrowed it down to a few that then the board as a whole interviews those candidates and makes the decision so that there's some additional layers of, I don't know. I don't know how it's, I was curious how it had been done in the past and what the board's feelings are. I do like kind of the ratification of all department heads, just we at least would get to know, get to know them and everything. And then, but so I think if there's a period, and I don't know, again, MG off the top of my head, how frequently the police chief needs to be officially appointed. If it's more of, we're not in an active search or hiring a new police chief, but it's just a renewal, essentially a contract extension, or renewal or whatever, then I think that would just be along the same lines as ratifying
Right.
for us versus the search process and hiring and everything.
Right, because if we've got a approved renewal on a contract and we don't,
Right.
then virtually we can fire somebody,
Right.
and then we're not involved in the hiring to replace that individual, so, other than, at least if we were able to ratify that individual. Because assuming if we don't renew a contract, there's a reason for it, so.
So a little deep process question. How long would you like for this ratification process?
I'm a little confused, what do you mean, how long? would you-
Well, TA wishes to appoint.
Yeah,
He refers it to the select board who need to meet to discuss and ratify or not. How long between those two things?
so you're gonna say the
It's
board would
usually-
have to ratify within so many days?
You need
Yes.
to do it quickly, because it's
Oh,
a
yeah.
new employee, you want to bring them on staff. You're
Yeah.
probably short somebody, so you want to have that happen as soon as possible.
Right, and I
Yeah.
think
I
that's
agree.
understood that you wanna, do it quickly, but do you wanna limit it, because what if there's some reason they can't ratify
You know,
it?
some boards do have a provision, that, towns have a thing that you have to approve it a certain time or it automatically gets approved. You may not want that, but
No,
But
we
it's
don't want
a,
that.
yeah, it's gotta be reasonably quick, because you don't wanna have a vacant position in key locations for a long time, so it shouldn't be, I wouldn't think no longer than 2 weeks, it should be pretty quick. Then at the next select board's meeting after it's offered or something.
I would even say it's not gonna happen very often. We could do an emergency meeting,
Right.
Right,
unless within that 5 days or whatever we say it is, there's an actual meeting scheduled. It's-
Right.
it
I mean, I
might
assume,
happen
But
once a
not less
year.
than 2 days.
right. No, I think we would act quickly, but I just don't all of a sudden wanna lose a window if for some reason we can't ratify it, and then it just goes through without.
So,
I
just
don't
to be
know.
clear, for police chiefs and fire chiefs, often they hire consulting firms who go out and search for those people, like for instance, Badge Quest is one that does police department. So it may cost you $8,000 or something to hire a company, they come in, they do all the testing and all the requirements, and they look at sometimes both inside and outside chiefs. And then they make a recommendation as to who tested the highest, and they basically rank the candidates. And usually you pick the top candidate is how it usually works. Now, there are reasons for excluding those candidates if there's some bad reference or something. But that process most of that process is gonna be outside of the town administrator and the board. It's gonna be those companies that specialize in it, and we make the final decision at the end is how it usually works.
No.
I'm just telling you, that's how it works.
Maybe that's how it is in your world, but it's not the way in the world of Rutland. We always had our own committee. We had a subcommittee meeting that interviewed 8 or 10 people and then brought 3 or 4 to the select board. We interviewed them and we hired them.
If I can speak to previous town administrator search and the DPW search. We had used a search firm. The search firm basically served
Yeah,
that
they
subcommittee.
brought them to the town.
Right, that then they brought
And
to us.
then we had our own people
Right. That they would
interview
still-
them, not
right.
Joe Blow from Idaho.
Right, but we still said we wanted to interview the 3 or 5 candidates or however many, and then we would make, as select board, make that decision. So
Right.
I think that the search firm, in our experience, has kind of taken the position of that subcommittee, the sub-search committee, and they did that kind of groundwork, and then brought the candidates to the board for
Yeah, but
us.
we still had our,
Right, I agree.
we still
that
had our
we-
own subcommittee.
And I don't think what Ron was saying would take that away. Thinking Ron is saying that a lot of the background HR-like processes, checking references,
Yeah.
going through all of that is what they would do so that the select board
Well,
doesn't
they
need to.
have a strict, people like
Yeah.
Badge Quest have a very strict process. They bring in, often what they bring is they bring in a panel of police chiefs from the area to interview candidates and to screen it to make sure they get the most professional person possible. But that doesn't stop them from finally get into the final three and bring it to the board for a final review, just as I would come, when I came before you, same process. But they kind of narrow it to about the top three, and then they bring them to the board for the final decision. But they do pretty extensive legal review and understanding they know, how to be a police chief and what the backgrounds are, and that's how they do it. Because you're looking both internal and external candidates, and you don't want to make a mistake in those key positions. Those are really important. You don't want to make any mistakes. So. That doesn't stop you from having involvement, Skip. It just limits you to like the top three is what it does.
And I'm not
I'm just
picking,
telling- I'm just telling you
I'm gonna
the
pick
process.
on you a little bit,
Okay.
but not a lot. When it come to your job, that outside firm only could find 2 people for the job. Only could find 2. We, as a select board at the time, should have said, no, we want more than just 2 candidates to pick from. Okay? I mean, that's outside people, that's,
So that would only lead me to ask this question: is that if a firm that does that all the time has connections throughout the state with town managers, and only can bring 2, how would a group of selectmen that don't have that network do better? I guess is
so
what the
you could
question.
go to another group that does that stuff, because there's more than one group that does it.
There's
Some groups are
there's
really good,
numerous
and
consultants.
some groups are not worth whatever,
Yeah, there's numerous consultants.
but here nor there.
I feel like we've gotten off topic
Right.
here.
So, I mean,
If that's gonna be part of the bylaw, we could say that all needs to be done this way or that way or the other way. I think we're just talking about, are we going to be a ratifying board for whomever comes down to the last candidate? Are we going to be that?
And I agree with
So, yes.
yeah.
Lyndon, that we should be able to ratify.
Yes.
And so you're looking for a period, a window though, of when it has to be ratified to put in the bylaw.
I think it's best to have it in there. I think that the
14
risk of
days.
not having it is,
I think 2 weeks is, I mean,
2
that's
weeks.
plenty, and we would never put it off to 2 weeks, but I don't want to cut it so that for some
so
reason.
that you can't,
Well, what
between
was-
a weekend and a
Right,
holiday,
Right.
and all the things that get in the way.
right, depending on what time of year.
Not
it
being
hits.
able to get quorum.
Right,
What about simply saying at the next regularly scheduled Board of Selectmen's meeting or a special meeting called by the Board of Selectmen? That gives you the options.
right, but we would call a meeting anyway, certainly within that 2-week period.
Mhm.
And if there's any problems, it gives us at least that time.
Right, no, I was just gonna say, I agree, because if the hire was made on a Monday of our meeting, it hasn't been 40 hours that we could have easily get it on the agenda unless it was an emergency. That would give us 14 days for our next meeting, but likely we would still try to schedule a special, especially
Right.
this board, current makeup seems to be amenable to special meetings for important
Right,
business.
and I feel confident that the board would act quickly, right? That
Right.
gives us time to do so.
Right.
Of course, we're looking down the road at different boards too,
Right.
so.
Right. But I think
Yeah.
hopefully any select board would act as quickly as possible.
Judiciously,
Yes.
expeditiously.
So on number 9,
Yes.
I wanted to just comment this way, right? That's talking about an actual board members, be it non-appointed or whatever. If you have a working group of, say, department heads, that's not considered a committee.
Nope.
That even though it's a working group, like I'm using a working group of department heads so that I bring forward a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen like the ARPA funds. But that's not a formal committee. It's my way of getting some support and some hearing information so I can make my recommendation to the Board of Selectmen. But it's not a formal committee. So I just wanted to know there's a distinction between
Oh, absolutely.
working groups and what a formal committee if the Board of Selectmen wanted to do a bicentennial or something,
So to get back to, can we not to exceed 15 days? Gives us an extra.
2 weeks.
Well, yeah, you're just gonna say 14, I think, is that the
2
same
weeks.
fine?
within 2
Within
weeks.
14 days, yeah. 2 weeks,
We'll argue it tomorrow whether it's 14 days or 2 weeks.
yeah.
And then you have the power to appoint acting or interim town official. This was really geared mostly towards that position, towards the town administrator. But if the town administrator position happens to be vacant when another position becomes vacant, I'm trying to find somebody who's, like the treasurer collector is not on the list of, so it's one of those, you have to follow we've given you the power to appoint when
So if the
necessary.
town administrator was gone, though, what the board would immediately probably do is hire an interim town administrator. So it's not, this position wouldn't be empty, because they have to, they can't have nobody run the town. So they might make the police chief the interim, then make somebody an interim position.
It-
So-
But that allows us, I think, in any department head, if somebody all of a sudden just leaves, we have the authority to appoint
Put an
somebody
interim.
acting.
You do. The reality is that you wouldn't exercise that, probably. In fact, you wouldn't, because that's usually under the TA's direct appointing authority. So it goes back to, I'm going to pick on the treasurer collector again, because there she is, just right up here in my head, that if the town administrator, if the treasurer collector seat is vacant, the TA would appoint, because it's not on the list of select board direct appointments.
Nope.
So, subject to ratification, which is a whole separate issue. Yes?
Oh, but the treasure collector is.
Oh, is it? I missed it.
Number 5.
Yes. It's,
You're right, I missed it. I am lying as a bat. So, pick the recreation director. Fine. And in B, select board shall have the authority to suspend or remove for just cause any employee or consultant the board has power to appoint, provided proper procedures are followed with regard to the contracts, town policies, town bylaws, and the general laws. So if you can appoint them, you can remove them.
I'm Sadie. Yep, I'll go along with that.
I'm looking at some notes that I see. There were a few things that used to be in here that aren't anymore. There are things about procurement policies and procurement powers. Those have all been put on the town administrator and moved to the town administrator bylaw. There are, where's something that we pulled out? Oh yeah. In the current bylaw, the town is allowed to pass regulations concerning motorboats. That is missing because that power was repealed in 1960 by the legislature.
But it never got out of ours.
It never was removed from our bylaw. Nobody's noticed it until we do all that. So, refer. Let me just shoot down here for a second before I advance that. Okay, there we go. Yep. So now we go into, oh, I forgot. C is another duty straight out of MGL that the select board has, which is something to do with tax title, but I haven't read it in depth enough to remember the differentiation between what the treasurer collector does and what the select board does. There is clearly a custodial duty conferred to the select board by Chapter 60, Section 77B. And the select board may create, reorganize, et cetera, et cetera. You can play with the town org chart all you like, is what that says. So, here's some new stuff that we put in that explicitly gives the town administrator permission to fully participate in any select board public discussion. And to most executive sessions. The big exception being if you're talking about him or his contract, he's only allowed to be there if you allow him to be there.
But be careful, it's not allowing to be there, it's participate. Because by law, if you're talking about an individual's contract, the town administrator, anybody else is in executive session, they have a right to be there for some things, not all things.
For some, yeah.
But that's not about being there, it's more about participating than it is in being there.
Yes, that's true. You will actually find things like this in other bylaws that specifically, what, I'm thinking specifically about FinCom, that TA has to be a full participant in FinCom meetings, because he has perspective that FinCom doesn't have. Now, I don't remember that it says specifically fully participate, but when we get to FinCom, we'll see it. I will say, FinCom didn't object to that at all. Moving on to section 7. Yeah, there's a process for suspending or removing the TA. And it's here and not in the TA bylaw, because that's just the convention that I've seen in too many bylaws. That you want the power to suspend or remove in the select board section, not in the TA bylaw. Because it is, in fact, a power and a duty of the select board. So again, there's a suspension process and there's a removal process. Anita, do you remember whose town we used as our model for this? That's on my nice way of saying where we stole it from.
Yeah, this one.
I don't remember.
We have a couple of sort of go-to towns, but I'm not sure where this one came from.
And it may be taken, the resolution vote may be taken in executive session. It does not have to be, correct? It's not saying must be taken in.
Correct. In fact, as I remember, I think this was one of the ones that was given to us by Mike Nicholson. I
Yes.
think.
Yep.
This is all mostly suspension.
Tim, the only comment on this is that it has to be, it's subject to the contract that the town made with the town administrator. So the contract, if you do a contract that differs from this, it's subject to the contract.
Sure.
So are there any other situations where a contract may have differed from a bylaw?
I can't begin to guess.
If I think a lot of the contracts still have, I mean, pretty much any of the contracts could result in removal. It's just whether it's with cause or without cause, and if there's a payment involved or not a payment involved, or a suspension or anything. So I don't think that it's a matter of, I mean, I think that it would need to follow the contract, but I don't think that I don't know off the top of my head of any in which it would be completely impossible to remove a contracted individual. It's just whether there's an expense to that or not.
You have to follow whatever the terms of the contract be, depending upon, we got a whole bunch of employees on contract.
Right.
And the same is true of suspension. I don't remember any of the contracts, if they have anything for suspension in them or not. That's new. I mean, you got a host of different department heads that have contracts, and you'd have to look at any discipline provisions or terms in the contract that deal with those issues. And truthfully, I don't think that some of those have it, but I'd have to go back and look at all the different contracts. But
So
it could
the
be.
fast answer is that everybody else is governed by this B section, which already has contracts in it.
Correct.
And there is a specific process for removal It doesn't remove you from B. You still have the authority to do it. What the last section does is it tells you what the process is specifically for the town administrator. So it's still subject to the contract, I would maintain. But we can add more words to clarify that.
But I think that we need to be sure that, I mean, I'm afraid that you're suggesting that if there are other contracts that go against bylaws, really the contract should not be written that goes.
That contravenes the bylaw?
That
Yeah, I agree
exactly.
that should be true. I would
But
also.
is there anything that says that one does have the authority to supersede?
Well, just the answer,
I don't know how the courts would rule.
so the answer clearly is that a formal contract between you and any employee would supersede bylaws. But you're correct, the contract shouldn't be written that's different than the bylaw. So when you develop a contract, you should be developing that contract according to the bylaw. But now, I don't know I don't know if this is new wording, some of this is new wording, it's not.
A lot of this is
current.
new wording.
So this didn't apply at the time, but going forward, you'd have to look at it for any future contract. That was frankly why I asked the question is,
Yeah.
I don't think any of the contracts have, for instance, that issue of suspension in them, but I'd have to look and see. I don't
We
recall
also-
it, but you can discipline in a variety of ways, right?
No, well, we don't have a police chief bylaw, we don't have a fire chief bylaw.
Yeah.
I don't, treasurer collector, there is a bylaw, but I don't think there's anything. Trying to think of what other department has.
Well, there
that.
actually isn't a treasurer collector bylaw today.
Right, until it's finalized, or
There-
Becky, yeah.
There are many departments that do not have bylaws.
And a
Departments
lot
or
of-
department heads.
And a lot of that would come if we finally go for a charter.
Right. So, the other thing about B is that there are supposed to be town HR policies for removing employees. And that's what should be followed if you don't have any other bylaw now. So, that's what it seems to me.
There's a standard process used for terminating any employee's position. And usually, in most of the time, you see in union contracts where it has progressive discipline. You start with the warning, then you suspend. You go in union positions. Contractor positions, it should be outlined in any contract. It should be outlined. If they are or not, I'm not sure. But the reason why a bylaw can't supersede is because it'd be very easy for two parties to enter into a contract. And then the board saying, oh, well, we're going to do a bylaw that changes that contract. You can't change the terms of a contract by a bylaw. It doesn't work like that. So, but you should have the bylaws in place, and then contracts in the future should be adapted to the bylaw. Carol's 100% right about that.
Oh gosh, there's more to this process. I knew 2 steps wasn't long enough. Spent a lot of time typing.
I haven't even seen
Thinking.
a preliminary resolution.
Basically what we did when we removed, what's his name, as police chief.
Yeah. I don't think it's unusual. Now, there are a couple, it's not a trap. There are some words in here that are very important. Majority vote of the board's full membership.
Yes.
That is very, very important. Most votes are majority of those present and voting. So if you have only 3 members of the select board present, and it's in its current composition of 5 members, it's got to be unanimous in that case. because that's the only way you get 3 votes of the 5. That's a majority of the full board.
Well, I mean, even with a board of 4, 3 is gonna be the majority. You can't-
Yes.
It's gonna be the same regardless.
But if in one of these meetings, Carol couldn't be there, then you only have 3 present today. Yes, in May, you'll be back to full strength and all of that.
So it's full membership, meaning that because our full membership is 5-member board, even though we're currently operating as a 4-member board, we still needs to be a majority of as if we were a 5-member board.
Correct.
So that's,
That's where you got the 3.
right, yep.
Okay. I don't want to spend a ton of time on this. I don't even remember it well enough. Yes, there are even more words. But number 5 is kind of important. TA still gets paid. And number 6, responsibility is with the select board. Nothing unusual about either of those, I don't think. Please, Lord, let that be the end. Yes, that's the end of select board. Questions or comments before we move on? Okay. And now for a brand new bylaw, town administrator. This had been looked over by 3 of the, what am I saying? I don't know how to do math. By 2 of the current select board members. Lyndon was not at the meeting, and Carol, you are new since then. I'm going to try and review it quickly, since it's all brand new. And as I said before, the whole point is to, between the select board and the TA, to divvy up all the responsibilities in a hopefully holistic manner. So, you look like you're about to ask a question?
No, I'm fine.
No? Okay. TA is contracted, sworn to duty before exercising, and shall hold no other elected or appointed municipal offices in the town except when appointments are ex officio. Pretty straightforward. TA shall function as the chief administrative officer, shall be responsible to the select board for the administration of town affairs in all matters not otherwise provided for by law. So, he's the day-to-day guy. TA shall be responsible for implementing all select board orders and policies. There's a long section here about the TA shall be the chief human resources officer of the town. And all the things that as the chief HRO that he's supposed to be doing. Number 2, sort of piggybacks on our discussion from before, and this is one of those places where we're going to change it, shall be the appointing authority for all department heads, officers, subordinates, and employees of the town, except employees of elected officials and those who by statute or bylaw are appointed by some other authority.
So here, you're just gonna add, I think what I'm hearing.
Something
is
about
that
and ratified by the
Department
select.
heads, and just department heads, not.
Oh, yes,
regular
that's
employees,
true.
Just department heads. Be
Yeah,
careful.
yeah, we'll do it to a.
You don't wanna, you hire a, animal control officer, you don't have to bring everything before the board
Yeah.
of selectmen, but the department, the key department heads, that it's not unusual to see confirmations from boards on that.
Yep.
And it's just frankly an up or down kind of vote,
3 bugs the hell out of me that I have to put it in here. But the general laws say we need a bylaw that says we appoint this person. So there we go. That someone appoint, but it isn't specifically limited to the select board, so we put it under the town administrator.
What is that? Is that my gas inspector and
Yeah.
gas appliances? So
Yeah, that's
That's
one.
just
That's
the-
one of the
the-
people who reports to the
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 building
building
inspection,
inspector,
yeah.
exactly.
I never heard of gas appliances according to Mississippi, just to,
Again, it's straight out of MGL. You go to chapter 143, section 30, you'll find it.
And it's currently under the selectmen's
I was gonna
bylaw.
say,
Yes.
I know we currently do those appointments because we do, I remember being like,
And that's the only one that MGL says you have to specify.
oh, really?
It doesn't say building inspector, it doesn't say electrical inspector,
Yeah.
it's just gas.
Just gas. Well, the area of effect of a gas explosion is a little bigger than
Yeah.
a plumbing issue. But,
Since the new Green Deal, all these new houses are all gas, all propane, every
Yeah.
single one of them.
past the new Green Deal yet.
so, much like the select board has the ability to suspend or remove anyone under your appointment powers, TA has the exact parallel power. And then, town administrator may cause to be examined without notice the job-related affairs or conduct of any town department, officer, or employee, regardless of the manner of selection of that department, officer, or employee. If he smells a rat, he can go digging, and it doesn't matter if that person is elected or appointed, and by whom it is appointed. He's allowed to go digging in.
If I may, sorry. For number 4, for the suspension authority, which is similar to our select board suspension authority, do we want to, similar to how we're adding with ratification for the department heads, do we want to have something about for department heads that it come through, that select board is notified or something? I don't know if the board feels, I don't know.
So are you talking about disciplinary actions? Or
To suspend or remove, well, I guess if it's for just cause, then, yeah, I guess it's,
I would hope the town administrator, no matter who it is, would have the decency to talk to the whole board
Well, I
and say,
think-
look,
So
I
we
got a
would-
problem.
What would generally happen is the town administrator would tell you. He may not be able to tell you some of the
details.
particular details,
Right.
but he would tell you. Like I would tell you if I had to fire somebody, I would tell you who, why, the basic of why, but you have to be careful under labor laws what you can say or
Because
can't
if we
say.
involve the board in too many aspects of it, it becomes public.
Right,
Yeah.
right, and I guess it does say suspend or remove for just cause,
Right.
not, just not,
Not,
whether
not
they're-
just cause.
Right, not
Well,
unjust cause.
unless they have a contract that doesn't say anything about discipline.
Right,
It's not what we said.
right, but I guess, I'm just, I mean, I think it's fine. After rereading it.
But I see what you're saying, especially if it's a department head. I mean, if we're gonna lose a department head over it, or something, somebody's gonna be suspended who runs one of our departments, the board's obviously gonna want to be aware of some part.
And I think if any town administrator would just do it, I don't see that as an issue.
There are some things you can't
Say.
regulate.
Right.
Decent communications, I think, is one of those things you can't regulate.
Yeah, and they're very poor in this town.
Well, that's true. So, town administrator shall be the chief financial officer of the town. Create the town's balanced annual budget, etc., etc. Recommend compensation. Periodically reviews the town's expenditures for conformance. Basically what a CFO is supposed to do. And again, I know that FinCom read this and reviewed it and did not. Their total comment was they wanted the word balanced in E1. That was their one request for change. So there's no question they reviewed it and they didn't complain or argue or suggest dissatisfaction.
So it says that the town administrator will periodically review the town's expenditures. So, I mean, that's kind of like vague, isn't it?
It's supposed to be.
I mean, we have the report.
No, I know what the report is, and you look at it all the time, but that's why it says periodically. That doesn't really define, you might look at it like quarterly or twice a
yearly.
year. Yeah,
Once a year is periodically, certainly.
Right, well, that's, and that's something that should be looked at regularly, so I guess I'm concerned that it's vague.
Well, it's very difficult because when you're looking at the budget, you know, the first quarter, second quarter, you don't know when the money's gonna be spent from a particular department head. So it doesn't get real meaningful until like the third quarter where you could actually see that it might be going over or whatever. But the first 2 quarters, it doesn't help you all that much because you don't, you say the insurance payment might be paid at the beginning of the year, at the end of the year. So you just don't.
Well, I mean,
I would
we
hate-
had a situation where a line item was overspent that came out at some point. So I mean, it's important because all of a sudden, like you said, maybe they're not going to spend a lot of money then towards the end of the year, but then all of a sudden you look and all the money's been spent.
Yeah.
So I guess I have a concern on how regularly somebody's reviewing that.
And I don't disagree with that. I think the issue is, I don't know how to codify how frequently someone should do this.
I'd rather it be regularly.
Whatever.
Okay, sure.
I mean, I know, but at least it sounds a little bit more regularly. I mean, can someone think of a better word to?
I'm trying to think, because I think it depends on how long a town administrator's been in a position, especially within like Rutland, to know that, okay, these are the things that come out, so I can do a cursory look at the budget and say, okay, this is spent nearly 100%, but it's the expenses that come out the first quarter or second quarter, first half versus these are accounts that are at 100 or overspent already and they really shouldn't be. So I think a little bit of it is just dependent on the individual and the length of time the individual has been in the role. So
I mean, I know when I was on the finance committee, we would review that regularly, and we had a tough time getting it, but we wanted to be looking at that on a regular basis to be reviewing the accounts. So, I mean, the finance committee was doing that on a regular basis. I would think the town administrator would be looking at it on a fairly regular basis to assure that the funding, that the money is being spent appropriately and timely, and that there's not going to be shortages and issues.
I mean, do you think it's at least shall review at least quarterly? Then that kind of every quarter there's a check at it, if we say at least. I don't have a sense because I wasn't on FinCom and I wasn't,
Right.
I don't.
Like I said, just as a committee, we were looking at it all the time.
Right.
So,
And I just want to be mindful that the town administrator has a whole lot of other responsibilities
Right.
and that this can become very quickly time consuming
Right.
if it's a high priority for sure. And so I don't want to micromanage town administrator's time
right.
at the same, because I think different individuals would want or need to spend more time than others, but I do agree that there's a high level of importance to that, and so how can we?
Right. I mean, how do you guys feel about what would be an appropriate way to assure that it's being reviewed?
You said the FinCom was looking at it all the time.
And I don't know that they're getting that now. I used to have to fight to get that.
I guess that's what should the budget be available at all times to FinCom?
Well, that report should be available to them.
Usually they get that report quarterly. I don't know how often it's going out now, but usually it's quarterly that they get it.
Doesn't you go to Becky to get that in? Don't they go to
Yeah.
Becky? They don't go through Ron?
Well, Becky sends it out automatically. From our last conversation, that was the plan, is Becky was gonna send it out on a quarterly basis. But I'm telling you, I look at it all the time, but
Right.
it's not gonna become meaningful until the closer to the third quarter, because you can't tell much about it. What the chair is saying is true. On a rare occasion, they go over budget, but the town accountant's not supposed to let that happen. He shouldn't approve any expenditure that goes over budget. So it shouldn't happen. It has happened on occasion, but it's not supposed to happen. Because the town accountant shouldn't approve funds being taken out of an account that's over budget.
So,
Yeah,
I
but
mean,
if
does
you
the board
send
think
out 5
quarterly?
bills,
I'm sorry.
But,
if you send out 5 bills and they all, this one gets there before that one, now they're overspent.
again,
I'm not saying,
yeah,
I'm
when-
not saying it's not accountant, I'm saying,
Oh.
I'll pick on the fire chief.
right, but when the accountant gets the bills,
Yeah,
so you, now the town is charged for something, the accountant gets the bills.
yeah,
He
he
goes
pays
to the
that
accountant,
one,
he
next
pays
one
it.
comes in.
He's
but he
supposed
got-
to, if it ever goes over, he's not supposed to approve that bill that goes over. He's not supposed to approve it. And it generally doesn't happen, but there's been occasion it has happened, and I think the chair is right. There's a few occasions where it's happened. And it happens in, you know where it does happen, in situations where, you know, our building inspector was empty for a long period of time. We had to bring in somebody to run the building department. We had nobody, and the money went over during that time as we paid the building inspector was out sick and put it in. So in that case, it went over a little bit, I think, is the occurrence. It's not like it's done in a damaging way, but it's just a reality of keeping a department running because somebody's out sick and you have to pay them their time and pay somebody else to replace them. That's generally the kind of thing
So
that
how about if
happens.
we say at a minimum of quarterly basis?
Yeah.
So obviously, no less than, but as often as needed, so. I just felt that periodically was just, I mean, it just seemed
It's
like
too-
random,
I
yeah.
understand that, sure.
Yeah.
And I just feel like quarterly kind of gives a check. If a majority of the expenses come in, you know, third, fourth quarter, then we know that. But if there's any red flags in quarter one, it's at least, why is this, okay, it's a one-time hit that comes out in July,
I'll
then
give
that
you an
makes
example
sense.
where something weird can happen like that, right? So let's say Meyer, our insurance company, they tell us at the end, they give us an estimate of their cost, right? So then we put the estimate in the cost, and then it goes over by $50, and they send us a bill by over $50, but we have no money for it at the beginning of the year, so it's $50 over, but that's the insurance bill you get, because you did an estimate at the beginning of the year, so now you're over by $50. Now what generally happens at the end of the year, FinCon cleans it up by moving money around and the accountant does it. It's little dollars, but it could happen like that. I mean, that's kind of out of the control, because it's a fixed bill you have to pay, but the estimate was slightly off. you
Right,
know?
and I don't necessarily think that anything is necessarily intentional, but it also gives us, again, some of that health and wellness checks as far as, are these accounts significantly underfunded because their expenses are way over
Yeah.
legitimately what they should be.
Right, it's just
How-
like checks and balances, just to ensure things are being
Right.
monitored. So, I mean, if the board's comfortable, I think the minimum quarterly covers at least to ensure that it's being regularly reviewed.
Remember, Ron, it's $100 if you don't look at the books every quarter.
It's $100?
Yeah, it's bylaw.
Okay.
If you violate the bylaw, anybody who violates the bylaw is up for a $100 fine. Any bylaw. Moving on.
Where's
shall-
the $100 go? Does that go to the general fund?
Yes, I believe that's right. So we can make a lot of money by,
Yes.
So now we need a bylaw enforcer.
Yeah, there you go. Paying $50,000, and of course,
TA shall be the chief procurement officer, TA shall be the chief information officer, media, main point of contact for media regarding town affairs, point of contact for intergovernmental affairs at local, state, and national levels, shall supervise the administration of all appointed departments and committees, shall have access to all town books and papers, blah, 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 be an active participant in any discussion during a meeting of an appointed committee, including discussions in executive session. So this is, if he goes to, I can't think of a reason he would, but if he wanted to go to a Concom meeting, he's welcome to be an active participant in any discussion in the Concom meeting. There's an important one. This power may not be delegated. So the TA himself can appear and act as be an active participant in a discussion in any committee, but he can't say, "Hey, would you go in my place?" Because I
it
can't.
can't be
do this.
delegated to an interim TA, right? 'Cause if I'm on vacation
Well,
and Nick
you-
is taking my place, Nick should be able to go to the meeting and do it, so. you know,
Yes,
if I'm on
that's
vacation-
an interim, and that's what interims are a little
Okay.
fuzzy. It's just not.
But
You
yeah,
can't just say, "Hey, Nick,
He's
go
the-
to this for me."
He's the
because I'm
effective
here."
TA, right, yeah.
Well, yeah, if somebody is acting and is given all authorities,
Yep.
then they just.
Yes, because he is,
TA,
in fact,
effectively.
the
The
TA.
TA, right.
So, to Al,
To L.
Al,
I know.
With me, I know, yeah.
with you.
Let's all go to hell.
So this, do I read this that the TA can go to any executive session, whether he's wanted or not? As in, with the select board, if we're talking about something or we vote or whatever, then he may not.
Unless, right,
So
there's
this is there anything that needs a parallel clause here?
I don't think so, because that meeting would be covered by that bylaw, which supersedes, because it's a select board meeting, and that supersedes the town administrator bylaw. There are rules of
No,
precedence
I know,
here.
but I was
Administrative.
talking about other committees, not ours. I'm not saying the same.
The only thing he's not allowed to take part in is something about his performance or behavior, and in some instances, contract.
Right.
That's the only thing that he's not allowed to be part of.
Okay.
Yeah, but if Concom goes into executive session, he's allowed to participate.
He's allowed to participate.
Right.
Which is important, because if you're in executive session, it probably is a legal matter, and, I'm gonna need to be involved.
More than likely.
Yeah.
And frankly, they should be going to executive session unless it's really an executive session item, so.
I agree, and it should be.
And most commissions should have a
Yeah.
reason to be in executive session.
And most committees don't.
Yeah.
TA shall coordinate the administration of grants. Shall have the authority to close any town office or department except public safety departments for a day or a portion thereof. Snowstorms.
Okay, something's not here that I do normally that probably should be here. I apply for grants, but final approval on acceptance of a grants, I bring to the Board of Selectmen for final approval. I don't see that here.
Well, but you don't need to see it there because it's their approval.
Okay, so you're saying that's in the Selectmen's thing, they approve all
I'm saying
grants.
that's part of their duties.
Okay, okay.
Now, if you want us to say, number 6, bring the grants to the select board, we can add that.
But yeah, the final grant should be approved by the Board of Selectmen, because,
Yeah.
and that's really important because of item number 5. And that's really the crucial issue there, because there are some grants that, I want to get a grant, say for example, we're going to hire a fireman and say for a grant, but once that grant's over, we have to pay the fireman. That's why the select board should be involved in any formal grant acceptance at the end.
But
They need to know the terms of that grant acceptance.
is a grant a contract? I think that's what Peter's saying.
Yeah, once you grant,
Is
is
a
a
grant is a
grant,
contract that needs to be signed, it automatically needs to go signature authority or granting of that.
I
authority
don't
is under-
know that it's considered a contract. It's
Oh, sure it is. It's
any grant
specific.
that comes down
It's
is not.
specific performance because it's always an agreement that you will get some number of dollars for performing this set of tasks.
Yeah.
If that's not a contract, I don't know what is.
Well, clearly the state does that when they do the contract. But let's say Maya has a grant for wellness, and they give you $10,000 and you can build a park or whatever. I don't know that it's in the formal contract kind of language. It's just a grant, but that's why I think it doesn't matter if it's if all grants final acceptance has to be done by the Board of Selectmen. That resolves
Yeah.
it. Doesn't matter if
It
it's a
is.
contract or not a contract. It should.
Yeah.
I think all formal grants should be approved by the board. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I agree, and I believe that that's in there, and this is just saying, in addition to that approval, anything that's gonna impact operating costs or personnel, explicitly you're calling that to their attention.
You have to.
If you wanted to keep it compartmentalized for, you could change contracts and grants on the select board side,
Yeah.
just to cover it
Exactly.
if you wanted to do that.
I do think 5 and then adding 6 in about bringing it back to the board for explicitly saying bringing it back to the board is important, because I know for some of the grants, the safer one especially as an example, that was over a couple different boards, select boards, so their, board and town administrators were amenable to it, and then there's change, and then there's questions, and so at that point, if one board's okay with it and it to apply and it's applied and then it comes back, it's
So that's what I was trying to say, I just don't know if it says, again, you have to go back to the selectmen section, and say, the selectmen are required to approve all grants. If it's there, then you don't need it here, but if it's not there, you should put it here.
Yeah.
That was my comment.
Yep.
I don't remember seeing it in the other one, but it could be there.
We'll make sure it's there. They have a flag town at half-staff, town administrator may unless otherwise prohibited, designated writing an individual or committee to carry out any duty or responsibility.
So which flag are you speaking of?
The town flag, which is what? We have a town flag, we have 3 or 4 flagpoles around town.
Right, that's why I was wondering if you were talking about a flag or our flags.
Our flags.
I know of 3. We got no more than 3?
Maybe it's 3.
Oh, God.
I don't remember off the top.
It
I'm
does
talking
sound like
flag
a
poles
flag.
now.
Well,
1 and 2.
Of the town.
Yeah, 3.
And Maple Ave.
So it's 3, yeah.
Well, it's more than that, because you get the new one in the park, right? That the
Park.
Eagle Scout did, right? Isn't that
It's
the
Memorial.
Memorial Field?
Does the town flag fly there, or just the US flag?
Oh, it's the town. Sorry.
Yes.
All right.
The only person who can order the town flag, the federal flag
right,
is
is
the
the
president,
president,
the only, and the governor for the state flag.
Right.
And that's it. That's the TA. It's 5 till. I'm going to push on because there's one more I really need to get through. The Board of Public Works. And I'm happy to say it's a short one. And in fact, I think it's shorter than the current one. But that one was Department of Public Works. This is the Board of Public Works. So one of the focuses of the committee is to have better descriptions of different boards and departments and seats individual people than we do today as an aid to the charter when it goes along, which is why we refocus this to the Board of Public Works and what it does beyond what 69D says today. Shall be responsible for oversight of the town landfill dump sites. That's pretty close to words that are in there now. And there are, how many dump sites are there? Do you remember, Skip?
Well, you only 1 or 2.
I was thinking 2.
I was thinking about 2, but I don't know if there's.
Anyway,
Shauna Kill and the Little League field.
Right.
Board of Public Works shall be responsible for the maintenance and repair of town buildings and property, except those properties where an alternate authority is defined by statute, regulation, or bylaw. So, if it's a town building or a town property, Board of Public Works has responsibility for it. And finally, the Board of Public Works shall appoint. Yeah.
I'm sorry, what does that mean? For instance, to give you an example, in the town budget, we have a group of different buildings, and Joe Buckley puts in money for each department.
Mhm.
And that gets through the finance committee and stuff. Are you suggesting that that has to go to the Board of Public Works? What does that mean? I don't know what
The
that means.
select board is the Department of Public Works.
Right,
Well,
and
what
eventually it goes through the select board. Well, it actually goes to FinCom. Well, you guys put it on the warrant, but FinCom goes through the different buildings and the amount of money, which is brought forward by Joe. We really
So,
don't have a.
What it
Main
means
division.
is that, I'm going to skip ahead one.
Yeah.
Shall appoint the superintendent of public works. By the way, that is a position is defined in MGL.
Yeah.
There's a footnote down below that it'll occasionally will from time to time be called something like, what does Joe prefer? Director. Or some such similar title. So, what it means is that at the end of today, the superintendent does that work.
Right.
And he reports to the Board of Public Works. The Board of Public Works is at the end of the day, the top of the food chain. They're responsible for getting it done.
Okay.
That's all it means.
So it's covered by the DPW director already? Okay.
Yes.
I was just trying to understand what that specific reference had to how it tied in, but as long as it covers it, 'cause that's the way it is being done.
This was actually the current version of this listed some of the town buildings, but not all of them. They mentioned town hall. I think they mentioned the annex. They didn't mention the DPW building. it didn't mention any of the schools, even though that's more complicated, I know,
Well,
but
that's a whole
still.
different thing, that's nothing.
The
to do-
community center, none of that stuff was, a lot of it wasn't mentioned. So we broadened it to be all the town properties.
So, if I may,
Mm.
based on this, when we're talking about any town buildings, properties, repairs or anything, we should be doing that as a Board of Public Works? And does that even include, like, if, I know at one point there was conversations with, I think, the fire chief about issues at one of the schools or something, and that technically he can update the select board as that, and then if we wanted to take action, we need to post it as a Board of Public Works meeting, or?
So, fast answer, yes. In order to take action, you have to do it as the Board of Public Works, not as a select board.
Okay.
I think we should be putting Board of Public Works on our agenda every week, just in and we can
Well,
skip
and do
by
a
it if
tool
there's
meeting.
nothing there.
Right.
Well, I'm trying to think of your comment, right? So contractually over a certain dollar amount, the town becomes responsible for the repair from the school system. Generally, the whole school buildings are taken care of under the school budget. But if an expense like we had that fire alarm issue where it came out above that number and they wanted the town to pay for it, then the fire chief got involved and we ended up getting a contract. It was below that number, which they weren't happy about. But in theory, I guess, what this is saying, let's assume that the repair was 40 grand and the town did have to deal with it. Instead of the Board of Selectmen having to discuss that, it would have to be discussed by the Board of
See,
Public
but
Works. Is that
I'm
what
not
you're
sure
saying?
that's true, because Board of Public Works does not have a,
It's not
the
appropriate.
Board of Public Works doesn't have monetary authority.
Yeah, but because the
That's
finance-
a select board duty. So even to take action, a lot of it has to be done as a select board.
Yeah.
When it involves the finances of the town, it gets complicated. If you think about, if there were a separate elected Board of Public Works, that the Board of Public Works would have said, you know, we need this, but we need money, so we have to go to the select board to ask for it. It is, you almost have to have that bisected brain to think about the separate duties of
But
these two
also,
bodies.
somebody saying it could actually end up at the Capital Improvement Committee too. So that's why I say this is more confusing to me than helpful, to be honest with you, because the work is really done mostly by Board of Selectmen and by the Capital Improvement Committee. So it other than saying, yeah, it comes under the Director of Public Works, I find it to be confusing and not as helpful, to be honest with you.
And how does the water and sewer commissions fall into all of this?
There is no Water and Sewer Commission. It's all the Board of Public Works. The
So
Board of
the
Public-
water and sewer is under the Board of Public Works?
Yes.
This doesn't say that. I'd rather take that out and put
But
that
that's
in.
not how we've been referred to in the past.
And it's been wrong since
Right.
1978.
Okay.
We
Yeah, I
have not
just
been
know-
using the Public Works as much. We started using it, but in the
Every time
past.
we had water sewer discussions, it was as a Board of Public Works, but then the expenditures and stuff, mostly go through town meeting. I mean, I think even rates and stuff we've done as Board of Public Works.
Yep. You've done rates, you've done sewer, you've done abatements,
Yeah.
you've done water.
Right.
But we never did it under that, as the Public Works.
Which is a problem,
Right.
because it means that a non-duly elected board has not been performing its duties, and some other board has. Now, again,
It's all the
It's-
same people. So I think we should just do Board of Selectmen, AKA Board of Public Works, and everything, also known as, it's all the same people. Do we really
Well,
need to?
no, but they are the same people, but in MGL, they have separate duties.
Right.
And that's your problem.
Because I
It's gonna
could make the
be-
argument.
In fact, actually, if I may, I'm sorry for just a second. According to MGL, Board of Public Works is a separately elected body of 3 people.
At least review.
No, 3 people.
Well, how
That's MGL.
Now, how can the Board of Selectmen have 5 members if that's?
When this was passed at town meeting, guess how big the select board was? It was 3 members. I've already talked to the attorney about it, and the attorney said, don't worry about it, it's not a problem.
Well, because I never even heard of it, of us being the Board of Public Works, because I was having concerns about, because I thought we were Water and Sewer Commission, and I had concerns that we were voting on things that we should be voting as the Water and Sewer Commissions, but in reality, we should have been the Board of Public Works.
I'll go back and say what I said before. In 1978, I believe it was, when the town adopted Chapter 41, Section 69A through E inclusive, or A through F inclusive. The Sewer Commission, the Water Commission, the Highway Department, all of those things went away. They ceased to exist. There has not been a Sewer Commission since that date. Period.
But why, Pete, instead of B, why not say, I don't see anything here that talks about sewer water. Why wouldn't you say that?
Because that's what Chapter 69D says. It says you are the people responsible for the water, the sewer, the roads, all those things that the Department of Public, all
So
of
that's
those.
already in there, it's not spelled out here yet.
It's not laid out here because it's duplicative of MGL.
I
That's
see
why
what
it's
you're
not laid out
I
here.
get it. It's just repetitive.
Now, I'll say the same thing that I've said to other boards who have asked for some things from MGL. If there are things you want in here, tell us. We'll put them in. If you want us to say that you are, if you want us to list the duties of the Board of Public Works from MGL, we can do
Well,
that.
if you said it's only 3 people, it doesn't even work. Like, who are the 3 people?
This is one of the reasons I went, because it means that ever since, this is why I went to the attorney, to ask the question. And
Can we clarify that it will be the officers of the select board?
that's already done in the select board bylaw.
No,
Says
but
you
I'm
shall
saying,
act
but
as.
designating the 3 people that would be the Board of Public Works be the officers of the select board, the chair, co-chair, and secretary, or a clerk. So that way you're designating 3 people.
No, you can't,
You can't,
because they have to be elected to the position.
well, they were elected to the select board.
They were elected to the
And
select
they were
board.
elected by the select board in those positions.
No.
Well,
Nice try,
there's got to
no.
be a way to fix it, unless you're going to have a separate election to elect 3 people to be on the Board of Public Works.
So, again, the attorney says, town council says, we don't have a problem because it's what the town voted to do.
Yeah, I don't think it's an issue either.
I remember having this conversation a while ago about whether or not to split the Board of Public Works out entirely and create it as its own standalone elected entity out from, so basically on the
Just
ballot
like
it
some
would
towns have water and sewer, there's districts or commissions or whatever, there's totally separate controls.
And I thought there was a lot of conversation around it, but one of the things was that it currently is able to operate as a 5-member because that's how it was, the town had accepted it years ago, that current MGLs.
Right, we could, if we were to create a separate board, this bylaw would be expanded to say, shall be an elected board of however many members the town wants to make it. Because it is not unusual for local bylaw to have direct conflicts with MGL, but they can conflict, but what's the right word? They are not injurious, they are not offensive to MGL and the courts. If you say, that says 3, but we're making it 5.
I always thought that the town could do more than what's required by MGL, but not less.
They can
MGL was usually a minimum, and you can make your laws strictly more,
It's
extensive.
a little tricky. You can make them directly conflict MGL too,
Yeah.
depending on what the issue is. I'm not going to say a public safety issue would fly. I'm going to say that a government structural issue is not something the courts are going to fight
I'm
over.
not gonna care, right?
So I think, in my mind, having the conversation as to whether or not to split Board of Public Works out and have it become its own elected thing is a much larger conversation than what this adding it here is currently.
Right.
If we're operating, continuing as we have been historically, I think since I've been on the board, some of the boards have been very good about calling Board of Public Works meetings. It primarily revolved around water sewer. I think it became just fairly recently more obvious or known that it was also fell under repair of town buildings and property, not solely water sewer and major roads and that.
No, that's always been the highway department's public
Right, no,
buildings
but
and
for
everything,
us-
always has been.
No, I 100% agree for that, but as far as our actions as a board, I feel like when we were talking water sewer, we were very clear about calling Board of Public Works meetings, but most of the other building repairs, maintenance, property maintenance, that kind of stuff has been done as select board and not as Board of Public Works.
Well, I'm not sure, because I mean, not that long ago, I was questioning whether we should be voting on certain items as a Board of Selectmen, or, because I thought we were commissioners, and I started questioning that, and nobody ever commented that it was supposed to be Board of Public Works. So I was not aware this was another title that the board was holding.
This is one of those things that frankly got lost in history not very long after, I mean, how many people remember, I wasn't even in town when the vote was taken. And I only know about it because Anita and I did a lot of research on things. So I can only bet that most people still call them sewer commissioners and water commissioners.
Yeah, well,
I know that I've heard that any number of times in this room.
That's what we were when we were elected. Yeah. Way back.
Way back when. But it all changed, and people didn't change their nomenclature, people didn't update, didn't think through how the different boards interact with each other.
All right, so to go back though, if the select board is going to be the Board of Public Works, we need to figure out how to have those meetings and make sure that the division is happening.
Well, I'm sorry, what do you mean by how to have it? It's simple as posting a meeting and going through the same normal process. What do you mean by how?
I think there's a lot of things that we have been looking at water and sewer only under the Board of Public Works. We have not been looking at building repair,
Roads,
maintenance on
buildings, and
not
everything
roads,
else.
all of that stuff. Anything that basically that Joe's been bringing us
Yep.
is supposed to be under the
But-
Board of Public
Yeah,
Works.
Joe's here.
And we have those almost every time
Right.
we meet.
Like every meeting. there's
So-
So we just posted on our agenda that it's there, and if we need it.
It may have to be on a separate agenda.
Or
I
we'd
don't-
have to close out the Board of Selectmen meeting and open up the Board of Public Works meeting.
I don't think
And
it
have a
actually
split
should
agenda.
close select board. I think if you post it as a joint,
Yeah, joint meeting.
Well, like Carol was saying, almost every meeting would be a joint meeting then.
I would think the only time you need to have a public works meeting is if there's gonna be a formal vote to take an action. If Joe's just coming to inform you about something that's going on, I don't see that as a public works board. But I think if you're gonna actually have a formal vote to raise a sewer rate, to do something specific, then probably you have to have the public works meeting.
I agree, taking an action would require
Yeah.
it being a Board of Public Works meeting. And I also agree that just getting information, it doesn't matter.
Right.
But taking an action, you do need to be aware.
This is another can. I could argue that wearing a Board of Public Works hat may be that, yes, as Board of Public Works, we agree that this needs to happen, but then putting the select board hat on, it's not a priority in funding, or there just is not funding, or it needs to be funded somehow, or, so I could argue that, but that's another can of worms, I guess. That's that
It gets messy.
bisect brain,
It
like-
gets very messy.
So, I mean, other towns are set up the same way, where they have a separate Board of Public Works and a Board of Selectmen?
Yeah, for a time, that Rutland had two bodies that were elected.
Right, so
3
I'm talking
years, I
about the
think it was.
surrounding towns, that's what they
But I have
have these
Southbridge
separate.
did have a separate Board of Public Works, but they say very few things went to them. It was mostly water, sewer went to
Right.
them. Most of the stuff went to the selectmen too, so.
I'd just be curious how other towns are
Well,
posting.
it's an equally important question is why did the town combine them? Was it because we couldn't get people to run for the office? I don't know.
That's what what I was under the impression of way back when.
Right.
Probably like Al Scales' days or something like that, way back.
All right, I mean, like I said, that this is the first I was aware of with board members. Because like I said, I was nervous about thinking we had water and sewer commissioners and we weren't doing it properly, not even realizing it should have been done under this hat, so. All right,
Okay.
Bring up something else. I'm sure it's out of the scope of the ad hoc, but you made reference to an org chart, which I would love to see an org chart. Every other town has an org chart, and we do not have an org
The
chart.
first town
And I think a
administrator,
lot of
Margaret,
this might
created a town org chart.
Yeah, she did.
I don't know what happened since then.
Never
I don't know
seen
if
it.
Mike kept it up, I don't know if Ron's got it now. I have no idea, I haven't asked. Maybe we'll see what happens. So while we're waiting for Ron to return, let me ask the magic question. When will our next meeting be?
When will we be ready for the next meeting?
He's probably ready.
You want to go for 3 hours more? I can do it.
Oh, no.
Well,
not
3 hours
today.
wouldn't
No,
until 11
no,
o'clock.
no.
I need to go to
well, I mean,
sleep.
we're gonna still do alternate Mondays, right, from what the select board is that?
Yes.
you know,
Yeah.
And so, hold on, let me get my magic.
But kind of keeping them every alternate, right? Because hadn't we that was the original plan, and then I think with holidays and everything, we backed off, and it was once a month. But I think if we're aiming to get a good chunk done and complete in order to move forward with the May town meetings, then I think trying to stick to every other, so twice a month essentially, whatever that every other is.
Well, there will be sections that we will scream through. When we start doing all of the various committees, there's almost no discussion, the whole thing.
I don't,
We still have a lot of discussion about the entire financial structure of the town. And that's gonna be work.
all right, I mean, I think the next open one is Valentine's Day, and I think that's a good idea.
What's that?
Oh, we'll bring all our sweethearts.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
They'll all be
exactly,
nodding off in the
that's
corner.
exactly how mine would like to spend it. At a select board meeting, at home.
Aren't you going out front Saturday night?
Yeah, we don't go out anywhere.
So, if not the 14th,
The 28th would be the next
the
available.
28th would be the following Monday that would be open. You guys already have a problem on the 21st, 22nd, but
The
well,
holiday.
I should say, you don't have a problem, planning board has a problem.
So, I mean, so does the 28th seem appropriate for everybody?
We can do it. From the ad hoc bylaw committee's point of view, one of the problems is booking the March meeting and having an idea of what we're going to cover. We can only hold 3 meetings, February, March, April, because we just don't have time to do a lot more. So we have to cover 2 chapters per, which means that perhaps we're going to be doing public review before the select board has finished its review, but it's the only way to get through this, because after you guys, we still have to get stuff to legal, and all of that returned and managed before May 7th. It's a tight schedule.
Right, and then we're gonna be, doing budget meetings soon enough, so every third, so we're gonna.
So Wednesdays and Thursdays are about to get very, very busy.
Right.
So I don't have a better suggestion, I'll tell you the truth. Nobody's looking for a Friday meeting. So the 28th. There we go. What was the question we were going to ask, Ron?
Org chart.
You know, the conference
Org
Oh,
chart,
chart.
thank you.
Because I guess Margaret had developed an org chart for the town. Do you know where that is?
I've never,
Should be
I'll
in
look, I
records
mean, I
here.
haven't seen anything, I know that I asked for org charts from the department heads, and I got like 3 of them back. But I did not see one, and I've been going back through a whole bunch of documents looking for information, so I'll take another look. Wasn't specifically looking for an org chart, but I'll take a look and see if I can find one.
When there's such a phone, you gotta pick up a call and ask her where it might be.
I could do that. Actually, I have an email with her, I can connect with the email and see if she has such a thing. Did you guys remember seeing the org chart? Is that what you're
Oh,
talking
yeah.
She did develop one.
I think
Yeah.
I saw one when I first started. I'll see if I can find it in my papers. but
Yeah, I'll
please
take a look
don't.
too, and I can reach out to Margaret and see if she knows where it is.
So next time, hopefully, we'll get treasure collector complete so we can go through all of chapter 3 and start chapter 4.
Okay. And before we close, I was just going to mention for those hundreds of listeners about upcoming events for the 300, that February 6th through the 23rd, the Founders Festival, Railers Game Night at Wachusett Mountain, and the town ice skating rink is seeking a sponsor. And on February 20th, RHS celebrates the 1700s and Valentine's Tea. Not really sure what that entails, but they keep scheduling events, so just so people are aware. Just to support.
But I think they're pretty good about social media as well as,
Yeah, I saw the
getting
Railers one, but I didn't see anything about the tea and stuff
Yeah, I
on
don't know.
Facebook or anything.
and as far as getting it through the.
Well, I mean,
office.
I just picked it up in the annex, so it could be subject to change.
I'd also actually like to thank the 300 committee for allowing us to use the Blair Room on the 9th for our public information session. They agreed to do a room swap, so thank you.
And so you all set?
I think we're all set.
Motion adjourned.
Adjourn?
And do I have a second?
Wait a second.
Norm, you need a second.
Roll call?
Okay.
Benoit, aye?
Wait a minute.
And Nichols' eye. Thank you.
Did Norm, I?
Good night,
Norm-
everybody.
Norm, you need to second the Anita's motion.
Second. There you go.
Roll call, Anderson,
Aye.
Carlson,
Aye.
Crane, aye. We are adjourned. Thank you all so very, very much for attending.